Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 80 of the ReInvent You podcast. I am your host, Tanya Carter, and thank you so much for joining me this week. There's heavy awareness and a lot of conversations around relationships that involve narcissism, trauma, toxicity, unhealthiness, to even abuse, whether that's psychological, physical, or even spiritual. And these conversations are indeed necessary. They are extremely needed because it is very important to educate ourselves as well as be informed about these different types of relationships. However, this could also draw the question, well, do healthy relationships even exist? Is this something that people practice? Is it common? Or even if this is something that I can establish and even have for myself? Now, granted, nobody is perfect. However, when you've only experienced or maybe even seen relationships that are totally opposite than the healthy relationship that you desire for yourself, you could become very skeptical about either having a healthy relationship or even believing that it actually exists for you. And so when you create this belief, you can easily find yourself entertaining relationship dynamics that really aren't complementary to the quality of life that you want to obtain. You can even start to question things such as your value or even your worth due to the constant unhealthy relational patterns that you have experienced. You find yourself gravitating to only unhealthy relationships. You can develop symptoms of anxiety or even depression or possibly both. Or you may even avoid being in a relationship altogether. You might say, you know what, I'm not even interested, right? So, what I decided to do today, I wanted to bring a guest on to have this conversation on do healthy relationships exist? And my guest for today is Dr. Patrice Berry. Dr. Berry is a licensed clinical psychologist with over 15 years of clinical experience. She provides outpatient therapy at her private practice, Four Rivers Psychological Services. She specializes in treating children, families, and adults with histories of trauma, adoption, depression, anxiety, and adjustment life stage issues. As a speaker, she provides educational training on mental health awareness, integrating faith and mental health, and the impact of racism on marginalized communities. She also provides educational information on social media, including TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Her TikTok is amazing. Y'all should check it out. I ain't gonna lie, I like it. That's what made me like her. I was like, oh, I love it. I love her. I love the uniqueness. And so, without further ado, thank you, Dr. Berry. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's really important because, like you said, people can make decisions based on their past experiences or even what they think a relationship might be.
Right, right. And I saw what made me reach out to you is because I literally saw a video that you did about do healthy relationships exist? And I said, that's really a good question because we're talking about these unhealthy relationships. And then we're also saying, seek for a healthy relationship. But I'm curious on if we really know what that means and what that looks like. And I said, I got to have her. That was it. And that's why I just said, I got to reach out to her. And so I would love to ask the question, how would you define a healthy relationship? I think that part is probably more important than anything else. Is how would you define it as being a psychologist and just working with people?
I always start with no relationship is perfect. That within a healthy relationship, there's still going to be conflict. There's still going to be disagreements, but it's how do we go about managing things, especially when we have conflict, when things are going well. Am I allowed to be my own person? Am I allowed to fully express myself? Is there a balance of control within the relationship? Because I think things can get unhealthy when someone is trying to control the other person or we're controlling one another. And are we working out and reliving some of our past traumas within this new relationship? I work with a lot of people that end up with someone a lot like a caregiver, and they're slightly better. So they're slightly less controlling than what they knew growing up. And I like having this conversation because we have to talk about, it's not healthy for me to have to check the person's phone all the time. That it's not particularly healthy because that undermines trust. Now, if someone's giving me a reason to not trust them, then that's a different conversation. But there are times when it's not what this person is doing, it's what that last person did. And so am I able to be within this relationship versus learning something from that past relationship and looking for the signs? But it's like, no, it's more something within the person that they just feel like everyone does this thing. No one ever is monogamous if that's the type of relationship that they're looking for. And so I think being able to rewire, and we have to sometimes stop watching Hallmark movies and, those Netflix movies that are romantic comedies where things are magically fixed and the person always ends up with that one true love. That's not how life always is. And it doesn't always happen in the way that it happens in some of those romantic comedies. Because I think if they haven't seen it within their parents' relationships, or if they haven't seen it within their friends' friendships, what we do is we look to media to see what does a healthy relationship look like.
No, that's that's good. I agree. I'm totally with that. I think letting go of the fantasy of things and just really getting to the reality of creating that healthy dynamic. What would be some characteristics that need to be in play to develop that level of energy? Because for some reason, I just get this feeling that we may misinterpret what the word healthy relationship means. And so I would love to know, what are some characteristics? Like, what should a person be seeking in someone else and even themselves in order to develop that type of dynamic?
And it's my own personal belief. I think you attract a different type of person when you are more healed. Now, we're never healed because in life happens within a relationship. I think, oh, I'm done. I moved on from this past negative thing. And then I get in a relationship and realize, oh no, like that trigger, that button is still there. And so I do think that it can be problematic going from relationship to relationship to relationship and not taking a break to do some self-development. And so I think what's really important is a person knowing who they are. Because are you constantly becoming who the other person wants you to be? Because that's devastating when that person then rejects that, or that's not even good enough. And you kind of lose yourself within that process. And so I think having some identity, knowing who you are, and then also knowing what are your non-negotiables. What are those things where it's like, hey, if I see this, I'm going to stay true to this. And within life, things happen and people, but I think just thinking about those things that can sometimes help. And then, is the relationship flexible? I think flexibility is incredibly important, because if the relationship is very rigid, what that looks like is, if I don't text them back within 5 minutes or within the minute they text or call, then they're angry at me or they blow up at me. That's a problem. Within healthy relationships, I should be able to grow and change. And so I'm not going to be the person I was within a long-term relationship. We should be growing and changing. We're not going to be exactly the same. But if a person tries to keep you in their box, keep you within a certain, I don't know, personality style, whatever it is, if you're not able to grow as a person, I think that can be problematic. For me personally, it's really important that the person be open to emotions and have some emotional intelligence, so that there isn't that gaslighting. There isn't that, if there is an emotional response, that it's not like, oh, emotions are for crazy people, or, because I hate that word anyway, that the person allows you to have a full emotional expression, but that you don't take your emotions out on that person. It's like, okay, I can have emotions and I can manage them. Within a conflict, I might need to step away for a minute and calm down. And then we're able to come back and we either talk about it or we agree, yeah, that was a little petty. We can both move on from here. And so I just think that there's that communication. I think communication is incredibly important within relationships. And because often we hurt the people that are the closest to us.
Really?
In my experience,
Wow.
often the people that see, because I know people that they'll go to work and work doesn't know that they have a temper, go to church, but home,
a whole different
kids
story.
know. And I just think, so that whole series about relationships, it came out of talking about that there are times that within families, things can be really rigid, and that within healthy families, we're able to be ourselves within our community, within our family, but that I don't have to be something for this person, because relationships can get a little codependent. A good friend of mine defines codependence as over functioning in their life and under functioning in mine. So I work with a lot of people that try to fix the other person, or that try to make them okay, or they come in and try to save the person. And then, that person may end up going off and being with someone else, or there might end up being a problem later.
No, that's good. That's really good. Being that rescuer is I see that a lot in quite a few people. Okay, so when we say healthy relationships, right, can that also be misinterpreted as believing that things such as having disagreements to even like your partner hurting your feelings is unhealthy, right? Because it kind of goes back to what you said earlier, the fantasy and the reality, right? So I want to talk about that, because what I don't want to do, and this could be also maybe a personal opinion of mine, I think we can overly use words like narcissism, toxicity, and you're literally shaking your head. Yes. Like, so, and I'm like, and I'm not a therapist, but I see it so much where I'm like, I don't want, just because somebody maybe does something, that doesn't necessarily mean they're toxic. And so we automatically think that this isn't a healthy relationship. So is that something you see a lot, or people may misinterpret that a lot?
I completely agree. I'm very careful about when I do videos on social media about narcissism to say that narcissism is a range, so that somebody can have a few narcissistic traits, but that doesn't mean that they have full-blown narcissists. Like, that doesn't mean that they have the personality disorder. Like, there's a range with narcissism, and that some people, because a true narcissist cannot take feedback at all. And I have met a few people that likely fit criteria for the personality disorder. And but I think it's talked about in a very broad way that gets people's attention, but I think it can make people cut off. So like, oh, we had a disagreement, you're a narcissist. No.
Right.
You didn't agree with me, so that means you're toxic. No. And so I like how you talked about how there's going to be conflict. I've been married for, oh my gosh, I think going on 8 or 9 years. And I have hurt my partner's feelings before, and it wasn't intentional. But within a healthy relationship, you're able to apologize and repair, and hopefully work towards not doing it again. You're able to adjust. And then I think it's really important that people not complain about stuff that they knew, like you knew that person was messy. Like, they didn't change.
Right.
Like there's some things that because often we don't marry ourselves. We don't end up in a partnership with ourselves. We normally end up with somebody that we each have our own strengths and weaknesses. And so my partner is the much more clean one. He puts things back exactly where they go. I'm the one, the bread might end up, over by the toaster. I don't know. Like, so I'm the one that's a little bit more like that. When I cook, I make a huge mess. Then when he cooks, like he does one thing at a time and cleans everything up. And so like we are different, but we accept and appreciate each other's differences. I don't try to make him be like me, and he doesn't try to make me be like him.
That's good. No, that's good. I really wanted to ask that question so bad because I see it being used. And like you said, it gets a lot of attention. And it does need to be a conversation, but I also believe it can be overly used in ways where I don't think people really get the true definition of it. And so that's why I wanted to address that question. What is your observation when it comes to a dynamic where, let's just say, one person is more on the side of the healthier approach, right, to a relationship where they want to talk, they want to work things out intelligently, they care, they may lead with a level of empathy, but then you have the other person in the relationship who's more on the extreme side where they're quite the opposite. Will that work?
And I think it's what the person's willing to accept. And if you accept it, but to think about, could I do this forever? Could I forever be the healthier person? Because let's say they know that other person doesn't believe in therapy. They're not going to go for marriage, counseling or support. They're not going to do a workbook or read a book, that this person might be stuck. And so, because often I think people get into a relationship and think, oh, they're going to change. Oh, once we have kids. Oh, once this happens.
If I love them enough. Yeah, no. Y'all ought to see her faces, but I guess this is stuff you hear all the time. Like, if I love them enough, then it will. Yeah.
And the thing is, I think change has to come from within. So if that person changes for you, and I've worked with people that the person changed for them, but guess what? When it didn't work out, they went back. I call it going back to default. Like the person went back to exactly how they were before. It wasn't a long-lasting change. A long-lasting change comes from within. It's something that I decide. I look at it and I see, ooh, that's a problem. I need to work on that. I need to make sure that I'm not doing that. Because I like how you talked about, I think we have to realize, am I the toxic person? Like, is a little bit of this, am I bringing some toxicity to this situation? Because it's a real big red flag to me if you're talking to somebody and they're like, oh, this is what was wrong with that person. And this is what was wrong with that person. Oh my gosh, this is what was wrong with that person. And if you ask them, oh, so like, what would you do different? Or how did you add to that dynamic? And like, oh, I did nothing. That's likely not true. So within psychology, we talk about pursuer distancer. And that's a very common dynamic within relationships where one person is running after the person and the other person is running away. And the more the pursuer runs after them, the faster the other person, like the more distance the other person needs. And often what's needed is the distancer needs to approach, the distancer needs to come, because there's often anxiety or there's normally something that's getting in the way of that person, like they're avoiding the emotions of getting close or something's happening for the distancer. But also that pursuer is like, I have to finish this conversation now. You can't walk out of my presence. We have to finish this now. That the pursuer needs to take a breath and not pursue as much and give the other person time to approach. And yeah.
Wow. No, you said something that I actually would love to go back and revisit. Just, we can actually be the unhealthy person too, especially when, I keep attracting the same type of person, just in a different package. And I want to kind of address that because this is now a pattern. And I think this is the part where most people get this misunderstanding that, okay, I'm just going to go into another relationship and we're just going to ride into the sunset. And that's just not realistic when your relational pattern is very, very similar. What is important for people to unlearn to embrace a healthy relationship? Because I'm gonna be honest with you, Dr. Berry, I'm an advocate of like working on yourself before you get into another relationship. Especially even if they're not constant relationships you've been in, it could have been one that you've been in for years. That exchange of energy can be very unhealthy and it can leave residue. And so, what is important for people to unlearn? Because, when we say these, I want a healthy relationship, like that sounds great to say it, but to actually embrace it, and also like not run away from it. Because if you've never had it, you can easily self-sabotage.
Some things that are really important for me is people not getting verbally aggressive with one another during conflict. And verbal aggression is just yelling, screaming, you know, threatening to leave if I'm not going to do it. Because sometimes people will threaten within relationships, and that can be sometimes a learned pattern that, oh, if I do this, the person then stays. Or if I have this big, the only time they pay attention to my emotions is when they get really big. And I think being able to express some of those needs and to find healthier outlets. So I believe in couples having rules of engagement, having an agreement like, hey, this is how we are and are not going to engage with one another. We're not bringing up something from 10 years ago, because either I need to make a decision about what happened 10 years ago, or we need to find a way to move forward. And 10 years ago, because with some couples I've worked with, it was, leaving towels on, like it wasn't like a major thing. And also just making sure that within relationships that we're taking time to communicate our needs. So that's something that's really common. I see people wanting their partner to anticipate their needs. Mm-hmm. Like, I coughed, I want you to anticipate that I want water. You didn't bring me water. So the story I'm telling myself is you don't care about me.
Right. You have to challenge these beliefs seriously, because I'm absolutely.
And so just the other day, something I ask my partner, and everything you ask for, you're not going to get. So if I say, hey, are you able, this is what I'm needing from you. And the person says, oh, like, this is what's on my plate. Because sometimes we don't know what the other person is really dealing with. Like, we look at them and we say, oh, they're just watching football, they're not doing anything. And because then we're over here getting mad and they don't even know the other person, or they're just like, oh, like, they're just mad. They don't like it when I watch football, but it's like, no, you're ignoring me. Or like the person is having this whole dialogue by themselves and they haven't communicated. I really like some more one-on-one time. So on Sundays, on the big, game days, can we set aside some time, or during halftime or something? Or so being able to communicate those things, I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, just learning how to effectively communicate. I like that. I would like to ask you just a personal question when it comes to healthy relationships. Was that something that you had to cultivate in your life? Would you say that you grew up in an environment where this type of energy existed, or was it something that you had to create yourself?
So I'm extremely thankful that my mom did not stay with my dad. I love my dad. They were pretty toxic, and they divorced, shortly after I was born. And my mom has never spoken a negative word about my dad. She encouraged our relationship. We traveled separate. My dad was in the Air Force. And so I was raised mostly by my mom, and I would visit my dad. He was in the Air Force every like 5 to 6 years or so. And something that I had to grow in was, because my dad remarried about 2 years, maybe a year or two after, and I had to grow through, because sometimes we have some daddy wounds or some mama wounds. And so I had to heal some of those early parental wounds. of feeling abandoned or feeling, and he didn't. Like, my mom was the one who was like, I can't do this. This isn't healthy for me. And because sometimes we think staying together for the kids is the best thing for them, but it's only best if the two people are going to be cordial. Like, it's not good if there's a whole bunch of toxicity. Because I think if they had stayed together, I would have had an image of an unhealthy dynamic between them. So like my stepmom, my mom, like we all get along, and like we have this good relationship. I have two brothers and a sister, with my dad and stepmom, and but I had to heal some things in me, because there were those times, the story I told myself wasn't true, of thinking, why didn't he stay for me? Or like, there were just some things that I had to deal with for myself. Growing up, I didn't date a lot. Like, and I'm a spiritual person. I feel like God was just like, she got enough daddy issues. If you add some more relationship issues, like, she's just gonna be a mess. I don't know. Like, so I was able to do a lot of personal development, and even within my own relationship now, we were actually set up by a family friend. And because I used to joke that my picker was broken. Like, the people I liked didn't like me, the ones that liked me, I didn't like them. And but I always took feedback. So there were close people around me that would say, that were trustworthy, because you can't listen to everybody. Because
Yeah,
sometimes,
absolutely.
like, there are some people that are drawn to chaos, that are drawn to drama, but I had healthy people around me that could say, watch out for this, if I was talking to someone and they kind of noticed some things. But it was something that I had to cultivate for myself. I read a lot of books. And then I tried therapy before, when I was in grad school. It wasn't the right fit. And then after we were married for a few years, I went back to therapy, and that greatly improved our relationship, because I had some things that I needed to work on, just to show up and be a better me. Because I
Right.
think that's what people sometimes don't realize, is that relationships don't fix things.
Mm.
Relationships don't. So if somebody is broken, single, or if you're lonely, single, relationships don't make you less single, because there are people that end up with someone and they still feel single with someone right by, or feel lonely with somebody right beside them, which is worse, I think, than like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm physically alone. I get why I'm lonely. But I think being able to talk about and address some of those past wounds, and then if there have been past relationships, because I've seen people punish this new partner for things the last person did, or things this
Mm.
other person did. Like, oh, because of this, you can never go out with your friends. But like, not something this person has done. Like, that was something that the other person did.
Correct. Wow. No, that's really good. I love that. How do you know if you're in a healthy relationship? And the reason why I say this is because it all goes back to what you said earlier about the fantasy. Like, realistically, if we can just eliminate the media, the movies, and focus on like what is in front of me and what energy is being exchanged on a daily basis, what are some examples of signs indicating that this is more of a healthier version of a relationship for people? Because I think people need to do an audit, and so I would love to hear from you, like what could be some things for people to pay attention to on whether or not if they're in a healthy relationship.
To me, a healthy relationship, it's two people choosing one another every single day.
Mm.
To me, relationships have choice. And I choose to be here, and I want to be here. And because there will be days that the person doesn't, even in the best of relationships, best of marriages, best, because your intimate partner knows parts of you that you never even knew. I've heard a pastor describe relationships as mirrors, that relationships show you parts of yourself that you didn't even see. And so even within myself, within my own relationship, my partner shows me, oh, you need to take a break. you work a little too much. You need
Yeah.
to just learn how to be, just not be on your phone, not do things. And those are things I have to actively do. And so I think within healthy relationships, we are growing together. And there might be times and periods where things get difficult. So difficulty is different than like the relationship isn't safe.
Oh, could we talk about that? Because I want to make sure that we understand that it kind of goes into saying that we can misinterpret healthy as never any problems or perfection. So, how would a person be able to differentiate between difficulty versus like, no, this is just straight up unhealthy?
And so there are major times, grief, a couple managing grief, that
Mm.
is something that can bring up difficulty. Uh, Starting like living together, making a long-term commitment, having children, different transitions in our lives that can bring up difficult moments. But it's how do we handle and manage that? And I think people sometimes need space. So the person isn't always going to be an excellent communicator. There are going to be times that people get it wrong, but how do we move forward? And are we open? So I'm a big believer, if things are getting pretty rough and both people are committed to the relationship working, being open to getting outside consult from a marriage therapist or from sometimes a pastoral, sometimes churches or different areas can have somebody that's available to speak into relationships. But that safety, so emotional safety, which I think is, we talk about physical safety, but feeling emotionally safe is that you can know my darkest secret and you won't use it against me. And when I say secret, it's like, my husband never tells me you're just like your, like, so there are language, there are things we can do that we know, because a relationship is a team. We're not, so there's no win-lose. It's either a lose-lose or a win-win. Because I've seen people attack each other, because when there's conflict, you can immediately view the other person as your enemy. And every person in a relationship, they know that one thing they can say to quote unquote win the argument. But
Absolutely.
it's choosing to not. No, I'm gonna walk. Ooh, I feel, ooh, I need to walk away. I need to
Yes.
go. So I clean. That's what I do when I'm kind of in my head trying to figure out, I need to figure out, okay, is this situation or is this something else? Am I just stressed? Because also just being overstressed can make you more agitated by things and by people. And so just being able to, because you ask for those signs, and because I think there needs to be that choice. I've gotten concerned for some people that I've worked with when they were afraid for their safety if they ever did leave. I think that's a problem. I think that there should be some level of, we want to do this together. And then also, like I said, that people are also agreeing to not to be on the same team and work with one another. And then lastly, that we don't bring other people that don't need to be in it into the argument. Because sometimes what happens within relationships, if I go and tell my mom something that I'm frustrated with my partner, and then I go back, she's gonna be like, oh, but wait, didn't he? Wait a minute, didn't? And so there's some things that I think do need to stay, as long, because we're talking about minor, like it's not anything major, that your best friend might not need to know everything
Right thing.
about the
Right.
relationship.
Mhm.
And because I think sometimes venting, there's a thin line between just venting and then just, it's called trauma dumping, where I just, to this unsuspecting person, I'm just going blah and dumping all my pain onto them, and I feel better, but then they're left like feeling
Like
so concerned
emotional dumping grounds. Right. Absolutely.
that I have to be careful. So before I share, it's like, wait a minute, is this going to change how that person views my partner, or you know that your one family member cannot stand your partner. So if you go and tell them,
Right.
like they're gonna be, oh, you should, like they are not gonna give you sound counsel.
Of
And
course not.
so just knowing who, and then please don't put everything on social media. Please, God, please do not. Like, some things I think should be private and people, so, because then all of your online friends are involved and they don't understand why the person went back. And so just having some level of privacy, I think, can also really be helpful.
Oh, yeah, that's that's good. I love that. I know you said that earlier that some people just like chaos. Some people like conflict. It's almost as if it's not confrontational, I don't even want it. And with that being said, do you believe that some people just truly don't want healthy relationships? I mean, it sounds great, but it can also feel wrong if you understand what I'm saying. Like, because that person who really wants to embrace the healthy side or really come into a relationship with a healthy approach, they're totally opposite than what you've experienced. Can some people just really not be interested?
The way that I talk about it in when I'm working with people is that sometimes the brain can get addicted to chaos, but it's a subconscious thing. It's not anything that person will ever admit. So if you tell them you're addicted to chaos, they'll be like, no, you're the chaos. You're the, like, they won't really admit it. Because if I grew up in a very chaotic environment early on and never found a way to repair some of that emotional, because the brain will rewire itself to survive. We are wired to survive. And so if I'm in a chaotic environment, I need to pay attention to every little thing. Tone of voice becomes incredibly important because that might have kept me safe, being aware of all of those things. Or maybe me getting a parent mad might have kept me safe from, or kept another parent safe or sibling safe from some other type of negative event.
Right.
And so I think sometimes those early experiences are just kind of people that have been in just bad thing after bad thing after bad thing. The brain can get used to that. And I've had some people describe it that a good relationship or healthy relationship actually feels boring.
Yeah,
That
let's ooh, yeah, let's yeah. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead. But yeah.
we can go there, because when I'm used to having a partner that, because people can self-sabotage relationships too, which
Mhm.
is why I think it's really important to be aware of, okay, in a conflict, what's my go-to? Am I responding in a healthy way? And nobody's gonna always be perfect with it. Like I said, we all have our own things, but are things happening that are increasing the likelihood of that thing that I don't want? So I worked with people that didn't want their partner to leave, but they're yelling, screaming, cussing, calling them all kinds of names. That person isn't going to stay for that. Like they're going to walk away, go for a drive, but that wasn't what that person wanted. And so we had to work on, okay, when you feel yourself starting to get upset, you need to walk away and you need to just get to a healthier space. Because it was almost automatic. If the anger got over a certain point, they just defaulted to things that we knew would sabotage that relationship. And so I know situations where the person was being faithful, but the other person was constantly accusing them of, and the person wasn't. There was no infidelity, but the person had multiple partners that had been unfaithful. And
Mm.
so and so that healthier relationship didn't work. And so that's where I love how you and I both talked about how I have to heal some of those places. And I had someone describe this earlier, where, because we use the word trigger a lot too, but
Yeah.
just defining what a trigger is, because if I have a wound on my arm, an open wound and I pour lemon juice on it, that's going to hurt. But if that wound has healed and scabbed over and everything, and I pour lemon juice on it, it's most likely, let's say it's been healed for a while, that same wound that's healed, it's not going to have a reaction, but it can be reopened. So if I hit it up against something and it reopens and then some lemon juice comes on it, so it's not the lemon juice. It's the wound, and making sure to heal some of those places. And especially within communities of color, I think we haven't always been open to talking about mental health and things that aren't okay. A lot of things have been justified. Oh, people just do this, or you got to live. I've had people get very bad advice from family members and friends that they were in toxic situations and they were trying to keep this person in toxic situations too. So that's why I mentioned being careful who you go to.
Oh, yes, this is good. He said that some people think healthy relationships are boring. Let's go there. Because I want to go there, because and the reason why I want to go there, and I've said this before, that and they're often defined as nice, right? You know, I don't like the nice people, and I'm like, okay, let's not, you know. And so what happens is when people say that, like, it's boring, I want to kind of just bring, I want to discuss this a little bit more, where we have to realize that when you want something that's more stable and consistent, that is going to be different than what you've had before. And so it seems to be boring when it's actually fine. I don't know. I want to hear from you. Like, what is your stance on that?
I think it's because the person has to redefine what it means to be loved. Because I've worked with people that thought, if you're not jealous of me talking to someone else, like just having a conversation, if you're not jealous of someone looking at me in the store, then you don't love me. Like, I have to redefine, what does it mean to love me? Because within a healthy relationship, now the person might get a little like, oh, I don't want that person looking at but they're not gonna threaten that person, and like it's not gonna become this big thing, or they're not gonna grab me and look at me, why is he looking at you? I can't control his eyes. What do you mean? And so just redefining, okay, wait a minute. So love isn't that, like, the person really has to go through some personal work of what does it mean to be safe, be stable, to not have to constantly worry, about the other person's mood and if they were going to be in a good place or not. And not being, the other person letting you have your emotions and wanting to support and be there. Not, the person not asking for money on a second date. Like, so like, there are people that they've just become so used to toxicity. And we said, because we don't want to overuse it, but like, some things are definitely toxic.
Right.
And that a person that, does have a stable job and that does have a good relationship with their family, that sometimes the other person can feel like they don't fit in within that. Like their family or their life or their experiences, that they don't fit in within that.
Wow. That's really good. Do you think attraction also plays a part in that too? And when I say attraction, sometimes we could be maybe used to a certain type, but that healthy relationship may come in a different package. Not saying that this person is unattractive. It just may mean that the type that you visualize is different. Do you think sometimes we confuse type as far as the physical appearance with the character of an individual?
And the way that I'll answer that is, what I've sometimes seen is people accept a whole lot of stuff because he was cute, because she was cute, because so really not even their attraction, but within that relationship, that it can be harder to walk away from someone when I do feel this physical connection, when things are good physically, but not but outside of the bedroom or outside of any other space, it's not. Or to me, physical intimacy, because some people are like, hey, if things aren't exactly how I want the very first time, then it's just not the right person. To me, physical intimacy is about that communication, and are we willing to grow and learn together? And how responsive is the partner, within those intimate situations as well. And so I've seen people get, and that's maybe where that flexibility comes in that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
That what if he's not 6 whatever? What if she's not this? Or what if they're not whatever? And I think that sets up a healthier dynamic. So my partner likes my hair short. I love my hair long, so I wear it long. It's been short a few times within our relationship because I wanted it to be short. My partner does not mention when I gain weight. He can mention if I lose weight, but like he normally doesn't. And so, but I have seen on social media a lot of just toxic things where the person was like, oh, if the partner gains more than a certain number of pounds, then they're not going to be with them. Like that's not particularly healthy.
Mm. Wow. No, that's good. Now I know you have a book. You have a book called Turning Crisis into Clarity: How to Survive or Thrive in the Midst of Uncertainty. And I definitely wanted to highlight your book. What does your book put a lot of emphasis on, um, based on the chapter and the subtitle?
Yes. And so we're all going to go through things
Right.
in life. There's no way, we're all going to go through things. And I wrote the book right in the middle. I was thinking by the time it came out that, because it came out in June of 2021, I
Yeah.
was thinking that the pandemic would be further behind us, and
Yeah.
it's not completely behind us. And so, but it's not written only with that in mind. Just when things happen, when obstacles come, because I think a lot of times we give power to the storm and don't realize that I can make adjustments to make it through safely and to possibly even thrive in the midst of it. So the book is broken down into 2 parts, where the first part is just about surviving. Let's just get through this obstacle, this difficult thing. Let's just get through it. And then also thriving, because thriving is, because of what I went through, I'm now better. I now can help other people maybe not get into the same situation. I'm able to turn that pain into purpose. And that's a lot of what I go over. And people call it a resource. I wrote it at a level that was just very relatable, because that's how I talk. That's how I talk with my clients. And because I've gotten some feedback that other books on similar topics were kind of written at a very scholarly level, and the person really didn't get much out of it. And so I try to use real life examples of walking away from a full-time job in March of 2020. And that's why I launched my full-time practice. That I had worked for the same agency since 2005. And
Wow.
walking away from them in 2020, that was extremely hard, but it was one of the best things I ever could have done. I wouldn't even be here with you if I still was at that full-time position, because
Mm.
there was just so much work, and I had to be very careful about what I said and didn't say out in public. I wouldn't be on social media if I hadn't left. And so just that sometimes out of a difficult thing, and I walked away because schools closed and my job went away, and they offered me another position, but that position was going to require me to be on call 24/7. And for my work-life balance, I couldn't go back to that,
Mm.
and really just felt called to launch. And I'm so grateful I did.
No, that's good. I'm glad you did too, because you have a lot of people to reach. And I'm an advocate for therapy, because I work with clients who go through divorces and relationships, and just again reinventing their life. Therapy is something I promote very heavily, and I think sometimes people might fear it because they may not think they're here and maybe they don't really understand, but and I don't know, that could be the case for maybe some, not all for sure. And but I'm glad that you brought that to the media, because this is the stuff we need to hear. This is the stuff we need to understand from someone who you've been doing this for 15 years, and your delivery is what attracted me. Right. And that was just off one video. So I was like, I got to bring her on. And your book, y'all need to get that book, because I do believe that there's a season of storms. And sometimes we make seasons be cycles.
Yes.
Where it becomes, it becomes our pattern and our norm, and we're still got this dark cloud over us. Yes, go ahead.
And I think it's when people stop, because sometimes in the storm, people stop and the storm didn't move, but so the person didn't, because we have to move through it.
Absolutely.
And not at the same, because if it's not raining, I'm going to go a little faster than when it's raining, but just to keep moving through it. And I don't think we always teach people or talk with people about how, because sometimes the way that I got through things when I was younger, I need to learn something new. I'm almost 40. I need to learn something new for this, for this next chapter, that to do things in a healthier way, that I can't do what my mama did, what my grandmama did. I might have to do something a little different.
No, absolutely. I think being open to something new, that's what literally changed me. Not being so caught up in how things have always been, and I've always been this way. But if it doesn't work, and if it's not birthing the results that you want to see in your life, you got to be willing and open to change. So I love that. I just have one more question, because I know we're pressed for time. I know someone is probably listening right now and is doing an audit, right, of maybe their previous relationships and seeing a pattern of similar characteristics that aren't healthy. Okay. What would your advice be to this person before they get into another relationship?
Just make sure to find purpose and meaning outside of being in a relationship. So I have purpose and meaning outside of being a mom, outside of being a psychologist, outside of being a wife, outside of all of those things. Because I think sometimes people are drawn, because I think in our society, we elevate marriage, we elevate having children, we elevate certain things, and people feel left behind, or like they're not good enough, or there's something wrong with them if they haven't gotten certain things. And also to remember that every relationship that didn't work, to just say thank you. Because that you did not end up in a forever situation with something that was not good for you. On social media, someone said, hey, if you are 35 and you're still not married, you avoided your first divorce. And I laughed so hard when I heard that, because I think often we're striving for this thing so much, but am I trying to get something? Or do I want a relationship so that it can fill me? Or do I have something I want to give? Do I have something that am I giving from my abundance? Because if I'm getting into a relationship out of the place of my lack, outside of, because I joke a little. So when my partner and I were dating, he thought about, he was deciding when he wanted to propose. And I told him if he was going to wait another year, I was going to go to England. I was going to go travel. I'm about to go live my life because, and he was like, and so he made his decisions. We're together, but just to continue to live your life, pursue your things, that relationships shouldn't somehow stop that. To me, the right relationship amplifies who you are, and it helps you grow and become something even better.
I love that answer. I love that. That right there, that's it. Finding purpose outside of your relationship. That's important. Because that changes a lot in, in how you do relationships. Oh, I love it. How can people find you, Dr. Berry?
So I am at Dr. Patrice Berry across all platforms, and check me out on YouTube, TikTok. I do a little stuff on Instagram, but thank you so much for having me. It's truly a pleasure to connect.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for just, being a good resource for people, and just spreading your knowledge to us is very much appreciated. And thank you again, and you take care.